Like, I wanted to go over today just the different options of what people have to sell a home. Like, obviously, we work in real estate as real estate agents, and that's one way to sell a home. But there's also other ways to sell homes. So maybe we can talk about what we do as realtors, how we help people sell homes, and other options that that some people use to sell homes as well, because there's a few different ways to go about it. Each has their pluses and minuses, right? Their benefits and their negatives. So obviously, as a one thing you can do as a homeowner is hire a real estate agent to sell your home. And what does that normally entail? Well, it means you hire an agent, usually in the form of a contract for a certain time period, whether it's 3 months, 6 months, or whatever. It's like, hey, I hire you, Lorenzo, to sell my home, and the listing period or the listing agreement period is going to be for, let's call it 6 months. Right? There's different listing agreement options. There could be an exclusive agreement option where, if this home sells within this period, Lorenzo's going to receive a commission for that sale of the home, regardless of who finds the buyer. Like, whether the home's listed, it's on the MLS, it's an exclusive agreement, and we're having an open house this Saturday, and the owner's cousin's friend is going to come see it because they heard that the home is selling, and they come to the open house, they submit an offer. Lorenzo's going to help with looking at the offer and helping the seller through the options in that offer, as well as any other offers that may come about. And if they end up selling it to that cousin, based on this exclusive agreement, it's still going to be commission being paid to Lorenzo and maybe to the realtor of the buyer, whoever that buyer may be, whether it's the cousin or somebody else. But another thing that not a lot of realtors talk about, or I don't see a lot of these listings, is an open listing agreement where they hire a realtor to list the property, but it's an open agreement, and if the seller finds the buyer, then whoever the listing agent is on the listing agreement is not necessarily going to receive a commission because the seller found the buyer. There's a lot of different ways to slice it. There's different agreement options, and even within those listing agreements, you can add specific details that you and the seller agree upon, right? I think that happens often when maybe an agent talks to a for sale by owner that's already trying to sell their property on their own, and maybe one way to entice them to let them also let this agent help them sell the home is, hey, look, instead of me doing an exclusive agreement, let's do an open agreement. You can still continue to try to sell your home, but if I find a buyer first, or I get us an offer in before you find a buyer, then I'll be entitled to the commission by helping you find a buyer first. Or if for some reason I can't find a buyer and you end up finding somebody or someone that you spoke to in the past ends up buying the home, then I'm not going to be privy to any commission just because it's an agreement or someone that you already talked to previously. So that might entice somebody that's selling it on their own to enter into an agreement with the realtor to let them market this property and also help them sell it, especially when maybe it's taking a little longer than they originally anticipated to sell the home. Anything else that you see on that end that maybe I missed as far as how the listing agreements work? And usually we won't necessarily go into just yet what an agent does, but just the different types of agreements that are entered into between a listing agent and a home seller.
Yeah, I mean, on my end, when it does come to me, presenting myself as a realtor, I usually give the sellers a couple options. We could roll into that exclusive, and that pretty much means, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Home Seller, kick your feet up and really, I'm going to take control and do as much as I can to make sure your home gets sold.
Yeah.
The other option I present, which I still make them sign an exclusive, but I'll reduce commission based on, hey, if you do happen to go out there and market your own property and you bring someone here, you did some of the work, so you're entitled to some of the commission. So that's one other way I do go about doing that, is just reducing my commission based on the level of work that I'm performing.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you seen any agents in your office do any type of different agreements maybe?
Nothing that I've seen, as a realtor, I mean, I would say for myself, if I'm in the same city or near the same city, I want to do my job as best as I can. So why not go the full exclusive agreement?
Yes.
and do the work.
And most sellers, if they're going to hire an agent, most sellers want that option. They're hiring the professional for a reason. It's like, hey, I want you to sell my home, and they kind of go with who they, with what the plan is of this particular realtor that they hired. The reason that they hired them is for their, expertise in the area of selling homes, and a lot of times they want to take the realtor's advice and listen to what they have to say, especially, in my experience with different sellers, that ends up being the case. And there's not really too much pushback on it being an exclusive agreement. The whole benefit of a home seller hiring a realtor is not only the realtor, their expertise and experience, and what the realtor is going to help them in terms of looking at the different offers and what those offers are, what the details in each offer is, because there's a lot of moving parts as well on an offer, whether it's, a buyer with 3% down, or a buyer with 20% down, or a buyer that's requesting a termite up front, or another buyer that is, including in their offer that they're going to purchase the home as is, right? But the biggest benefit is the network of realtors that you are now privy to by way of hiring an agent, right? Because what ends up happening is we sell the home by way of the MLS. So we list it on the MLS. All realtors now have access to this listing. And if they have a buyer that's interested in this neighborhood, they're going to see it, especially if they're already looking in that particular neighborhood. And so it's a numbers game, right? The more eyes on the property, the more people that are going to come see the home, the higher the probability of them getting an offer, or the higher probability of it coming across somebody's table that's going to be an interested party in purchasing the property.
Well, that's the funny thing with the FSBO, or the for sale by owner, right? It's from the outside looking in, we have the cushiest job in the world, right? We find someone, we put a sign up, and magically it sells, and we're all millionaires, right? That's right. That's what they think.
Would be great if it worked that way.
Yeah, and I've driven by those exact not that every for sale by owner is stubborn. I don't want to say, but it typically comes down to money. Why am I going to pay someone to put a sign up on my yard? And I've driven by those for sale by owner signs where you can barely see it from the front yard, and they're relying on that sign to attract all the traffic in the world, and then it sits for 6 months to a year because nobody knows that it's for sale. So that's always a funny one to come across.
Yeah, and I think, now with the internet, obviously there is a little more visibility on a for sale by owner. I'm not sure if Zillow ended up doing away with it, but there was some rumbling that they weren't going to be listing for sale by owners on Zillow or Redfin. I don't think there are any on Redfin, but Zillow, I believe, does.
Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure I think Zillow still has for sale by owners listed. Redfin doesn't, but there's other websites like forsalebyowner.com and things like that. But what ends up happening is that most buyers end up hiring an agent, or end up linking up with an agent to help them find the problem.
Yeah.
For many reasons, to help them with the negotiation, to help them with putting in offers and things like that. And so that realtor is going to be looking at the MLS to help them find a property. And these buyers are also going to be looking at the MLS by ways of popular websites like Redfin, Zillow, and other sites like that, as well as because the realtor is going to set them up with a drip from the MLS as well and give them access to the MLS through whatever system their realtor association is associated with. So they're mainly going to be looking at the MLS for these homes. And if it's for sale by owner, it's definitely going to be a less amount of people looking at it.
Yeah.
But if the buyer does come across and maybe they're driving by or something, they're going to call their agent most of the time and be like, hey, I saw this home that's up for sale by owner in my neighborhood. How can we place an offer on it? And so now you end up, as a seller trying to sell your home, dealing directly with an agent, right?
Yeah.
And unless you do negotiations, which most people, unless you do negotiations for a living, like you're an attorney, you're a realtor, or something along those lines, you're going to come across some uncharted territory in the process of dealing with that. And most of the time, you're going to end up paying or negotiating a commission for that buyer's agent, right? Because they brought the buyer to you. So you'll end up paying some sort of commission most of the time as a for sale by owner, unless you legitimately find the buyer yourself. So what ends up happening is they pay this agent that brought the buyer. But if they were to hire an agent up front, they most likely would have sold that home for higher because it would have been open to all these different realtors with all these different buyers, and you would have got a little more competition. All you need is 2 offers to kind of drive the price up, because if the buyer really wants the property, they're gonna be looking to be competitive, especially if they know that there's another offer on the table. So you're gonna end up paying a commission anyways. If a realtor brings you a buyer, it's better off to save yourself all the time up front.
Yeah.
Statistically speaking, I mean, the proof is in the numbers. Homes that sell with the realtor end up selling for higher than homes that sell for sale by owner. And then you're also going to have someone that you can rely on, their experience, to help you through that negotiating process and navigate those waters during escrow, because it's not just receiving the offer. A lot of times it's the beginning, because now you have a 30-day escrow to navigate through, right?
Exactly.
And what comes with that usually? A lot of paperwork, right?
Yeah. Way too much paperwork for someone who's never done it before. Yes. I mean, it's going to be overwhelming.
And just the RPA itself is like 20 pages.
Yeah, and as a first-time agent, I'm sure we've all been through it. The first time we even opened that thing up, I was overwhelmed. And I was in the business, and I was like, Jesus Christ, it's 40 pages, whatever it might be. And that's just the basic one. Yeah, that's just the very basic. I think I made 7 or 8 calls the first time I submitted an offer, just because I was going page by page, line by line, making sure I wasn't doing anything wrong. Cause you're putting your client at risk at that point, and you don't know what's going on. And if you've never done it before and you have no one to reference or nothing to reference, that's a nightmare.
Yeah, 100%. And it's not just the purchase agreement either. There's a lot of disclosures that are associated with the sale. And I think what a lot of sellers that are trying to sell for sale by owner don't realize is there's also a lot of risk with selling your home. If you don't disclose certain things that you were supposed to disclose, that you were aware of, and no one told you had to disclose those, you could be subject to getting sued by that buyer, especially if you purposefully withheld information regarding the condition of the property, like maybe a bad foundation or mold that gets discovered afterwards. Like, obviously, a lot of buyers do their inspections up front, but not everything is always seen at the inspection.
It's impossible. It's impossible. I don't know if I've been through thousands of houses at this point, but I'm going to say I've been through thousands of houses. And every time we get that inspection report back, there's always something on there that I'm like, wow, I'm glad this guy came by and and did his job, because that's a couple thousand or a couple $100 that somebody's going to have to front to be able to repair this.
Yeah, and I mean, we've helped buyers buy homes that are in really bad shape, and we've helped buyers buy homes that are new constructions, and also or homes that are not new constructions but have been recently remodeled. And we haven't found a perfect home yet. I haven't received a home inspection report that's perfect yet from a home inspector. There's always something that is missing or needs to be adjusted or needs to be fixed, or even when it comes to builders, sometimes they take shortcuts or their employees took shortcuts that the builder wasn't aware of, or whatever the case might be. I have a friend of mine that purchased a new construction, $3 million property, and he's going through this whole litigation process with the builder because there's about $150,000 worth of damages that he wasn't aware of until after he moved in. And part of this was during the time when everything was super competitive. Part of the sale through the builder was there. You couldn't compensate any realtor through this purchase. Like, the builder was not willing to compensate buyers agents.
Oh yeah.
So he bought it directly through the builder. He was in communication with one of the sales agents for the builder, and a lot of his neighbors are also suing the builder. So the builder is a home seller. This just happens to be a company, but they're getting sued, and obviously they've sold properties to people that have money to be able to bring litigation upon a company for finding numerous defects on their property. This was a new construction. It's just to highlight the example that there's no perfect property, and it's not that you need, but it's beneficial to have someone that's gone through this process multiple times and can give you this advice up front and can help you navigate the negotiation, not only up front, but also during the escrow process on what needs to be disclosed, what doesn't need to be disclosed, and things like that.
Yeah, I would liken our job to like a personal chef, right? You don't need a personal chef at your house, but guess what's going to happen? You don't have to go for groceries. You don't have to have a recipe to follow. You don't have to do any of the cooking for the most part. You are relying on someone to provide a service that they are experts at. That's why you hire us. It's one transaction. Maybe people go through this, 2-3 times in their life on average. You want someone that's going to be able to guide you through this process that has been, the people who are doing deals in this market or that are still active today, we've seen something go wrong or something strange in every single one of our transactions. So we've been through it and we know how to get you through it, which is why you go which is why you want to go with a realtor who's going to know what they're doing.
And there's just so many details in transactions, even to the point of picking the right escrow company that's going to be on top of it. That's going to be communicating. Sometimes when we're on a time crunch and they're communicating with the buyer's lender and they need to turn around these loan docs so that we close on time. All those little things matter. And unless you're an experienced home seller, like an investor that sells a lot of homes because you fix and flip or whatever, but even they hire realtors. But even being if you're not somebody that sells homes often, how do you know who's going to be the right escrow company for you? How do you know that they're going to be, communicating the way that they should be and doing things the right way? Like, escrow companies and escrow officers make mistakes as well. Most of them are on the ball, but as a realtor, that's your job to also make sure that all parties that are part of this transaction are doing what they're supposed to be doing, or held accountable, or you're following up and making sure that they didn't miss something, because there's so many moving parts that things get missed sometimes, and that might end up delaying the sale by a week or 2 weeks or whatever. And when someone's buying a home and selling a home, and maybe the one that's selling a home is also buying another home, there's multiple timelines in play here. Like a little thing, something like as small as this is, okay, I work with an escrow company, and they're great, right? They're great. Most of the time they do everything amazing, but they also miss stuff because they don't only have one escrow transaction going on, they have multiple. That's how they stay in business. They can't stay in business with just one transaction. So home seller is selling their home, but has a loan on the home. They have a mortgage that needs to be paid off. Home buyer is buying it and they have a loan. So there's communication with their lender. Well, what we realized was they had not ordered the payoff for the mortgage from the seller's home. Right? And the payoffs don't always come in overnight. Sometimes it takes a few days, especially if it's on the edge of a weekend. Now you're talking 3, 4, 5 days, and that could potentially delay escrow. And luckily we caught it in time. Like, hey, was the payoff for the home seller's property ordered yet? And they were like, no, we haven't received the home seller's mortgagee information. And we're like, well, in my head, I'm like, well, why didn't you ask for it? But they probably just missed it. So because we were able to catch it and check with escrow if they had everything from the seller and find out that they did it, then we hop on the ball. We reach out to the seller, hey, we need to get the mortgage information over to escrow as soon as possible so we can order this payoff. And that way there's no delay on the back end. But if we don't catch that, then we get to the point where they're getting loan docs for the buyer, and now they realize they got to order the payoff, and it ended up taking us almost a week to get this payoff. Just happened to be one of these lenders that took a little bit longer than most do or than others do, and that causes a delay because they have to buy their home and they're on a timeline. And now if that escrow is delayed, then that seller's upset. His seller's upset for us. The seller on there, it's a waterfall of mistakes that can occur or delays that can occur with something as small as the mortgage payoff not being done. So if you're someone that's selling your home and you're not aware of all these little details that take place, it could end up costing you money and time. It could end up causing the buyer to back out. There's a lot of different things that can happen. So yeah, always good to hire the expert for reasons like those.
Yeah. I mean, you said something interesting. You said even investors hire realtors, right? And their job is to be active in the market, right? Albeit they're probably a lot more picky on who they go about choosing because they understand the importance of using a realtor. But even someone seasoned is going to go out and find someone who's an expert in this field.
Yeah, that's what at least what I've seen is, especially someone doing a fix and flip or something like that, they're going to hire a realtor that they know they can trust and that's on the ball and that's on it. Or they're a realtor themselves and have access to the MLS to put their property up on this platform that's going to have the most visibility. And most of them, if not all of them, end up offering a buyer's agent commission for that reason. Hey, if I put a buyer's agent commission, I'm going to get a lot more buyers coming to see this property, because motivated buyers are going to come with their realtors, and the realtors are going to be more motivated to show this property to their buyers because they also have to make a living, right? And it's for the first time home buyer, if a seller is not offering a commission like a for sale by owner, that buyer's agent is way less likely to bring their buyer because now they're working for free, or their buyer that they have might barely have enough to make the purchase work, right? Because the buyer's they gotta take into account the closing costs. They got to take into account the down payment required by their lender. And sometimes it's just enough.
Yeah.
Or they have to have a cushion for after closing to buy furniture or have some reserves or moving costs and things like that. So the buyer's not always able to afford to pay that buyer agent commission. And for all those reasons, amongst others, the for sale by owner is going to see less buyers coming at their door. Not saying that a for sale by owner can't sell their home. If you have a good product, if it's priced properly, or if it's priced lower than what the retail market is, you're probably going to sell it, but you're going to leave some money on the table. As far as for the investor that hires realtors, they see the benefit in it because they're in the business and they know that their property Especially them, they're profit driven, right? If they're fixing and flipping a property, they bought it for a certain amount, they put a certain amount in it in terms of repairs. They need to be able to make a certain amount of profit to cover their cost and maybe and make some profit on the back end to continue to run their fix and flip business and to continue to buy other properties and things like that. I know Angel's been working and communicating with a lot of investors recently. Do you hear about any investors and what their communication or what their relationship are with realtors, specifically for maybe investors that fix and flip?
Yes. So realtors that work with investors, generally there's some type of special circumstances with the property. There's sometimes where realtors will find a homeowner who maybe they have a hoarder house situation and they're embarrassed. They don't want to list it to the MLS because even though they'll get more exposure, they might be embarrassed. They don't want people to come in and see the mess. So the convenience of them being able to, communicate with this realtor, and the realtor has an investor buyer already that maybe they've worked with in the past for certain deals, they're able to, provide that convenience of having somebody come in. But the trade-off being, because it's not listed on the MLS, you're not getting as many eyes on it. You might not get as much money in the seller's pocket at the end of the day. But some sellers, it's not really their concern. And for the investor, if they can make something easier for them on the side of like paying for closing costs or paying for transfer costs or escrow fees or something like that, that can be enticing and enough for them to be like, okay, I know I'm not going to maybe get as much from the sale, but I will, because of the convenience, this makes sense to me.
And those sellers or those investors that buy these properties from the realtors, if they're going to fix and flip the property, do you see them giving that listing to the realtor, or do you see them selling it on their own?
Yes, a lot of time what the investor will do is that they will, because they were able to bring in that deal to them, the realtor brought the deal to them that they wouldn't have had in the first place. That is a good sticking point for them to have, be like, hey, I brought you this deal, but can I do the listing? And most of the time they're pretty agreeable, especially if they know that this realtor is capable of finding these type of deals that, are maybe off market or not traditionally listed on the MLS that makes sense for them on the fix and flip side or the buy and hold side or whatever it may be. Because for investors, the primary thing at the end of the day is that it has to make sense. Like Lorenzo said, like they do it for a living. So their numbers have to make sense to them, has to make sense to their bottom line. They're trying to make money off of that property at the end of the day. So that's the most important thing.
Yeah, I see a lot of investors offer that as an incentive to realtors to bring them properties to buy. Like, hey, if you bring me a property that I can buy, that I can fix, and then flip, I'll give you the listing. So that there's some incentive for that realtor to bring this particular investor the property, as opposed to maybe a different investor where they don't have that relationship where they know that they're going to get this listing on the back end after it's been fixed. And like Angel said, the numbers have to make sense for the investor. Otherwise, they're not going to buy the property, right? Because they don't want to lose on the deal. So they want to make sure that there's enough of a cushion where they're going to make a profit. And if it's going to affect them negatively to hire a realtor, they just wouldn't even offer that at all. Because they would lose money. But they know that someone with a realtor is going to give them more exposure. They're selling. Most fix and flippers end up selling, a turnkey product, you could say, something that's ready to live, which is what most people are looking for. Most buyers are looking for that. They're looking for a property that most retail buyers, most first-time home buyers, they're looking for a property that they can move in and live. If it needs a little bit of work, that's okay, but they're not. Most of them, what we've seen is they're not willing to take big fixtures because they're not investors. They're not construction workers, they're not handymen. Some are, and those buyers might be willing to take on a little bit more of a project. But the majority, if you're working in tech sales, you don't want to have to worry about redoing this whole kitchen as soon as you move in. You want to move in and you're going to be working from home, so you got to hit the ground running. And so, that ends up happening with investors. They offer the listing as an incentive, and they have a relationship with the realtor that helps them find properties. So not only can you hire or work with an investor as a seller, but also as a buyer, obviously, not only as a retail buyer where it's like, hey, let's go on the MLS and see what's on there. It's also like, hey, can you help me find a property that I can fix and flip? And these are the requirements that I need for the property to make sense, whatever that might be.
Their buy box.
Exactly, their buy box. It has to be in this neighborhood and it has to match these characteristics.
Yeah, that's when I speak with my buyers that are first time home buyers, even second time home buyers, and they're looking for a home. One of the first questions I'll ask is, are you okay with a home that needs some fixing? 99% will tell me, oh yeah, that sounds fine if we could fix it up ourselves, and kind of make it our own. They say that, and not realizing that when you do say that, the deals that are out in the market are going to have something. There's a reason why they're selling for less money. You need some serious sort of fixing, whether it's the roof, some sort of big ticket item that they know they have to reduce the price on. And it's always those things when I bring my clients to those types of homes, they quickly snap out of it and say, well, you know what, actually, let's find something that's a little more turnkey. And investors are going to be the ones who are looking for those types of deals. And it's just, one of those markets, especially Southern California, where an agent is going to provide certain services for investors, for buyers that are looking for their first or second home. It's
especially once you start running the numbers. It's like, what does it cost to replace the floor in this 1,500 square foot house? Okay, and what does it cost to redo the stucco that looks like it's from the 70s on the outside, so it looks a little bit presentable, from the outside, from the street view? And maybe we got to get rid of this popcorn ceiling. Well, what's that going to run me? They start adding up all these costs, and then they start realizing, well, am I going to live in the property while this is being done, or do I need to not only put this extra money to fix it, but also keep renting and paying rent, as well as the new mortgage on the property? So there's all these things to consider, which is why investors are more willing to buy the fixer-uppers, right? Because they're already aware of what the costs are. They calculate it into the purchase. And if I'm a retail buyer, and I've saved up 10%, and I have enough for my closing cost, and all my furniture from what I've been renting is old, so I'm going to buy a new house. I want to buy new furniture. It starts adding up really fast. And now you also have to start interviewing contractors. And is this contractor going to do a great job? And not all of them do. Some of them do great. I've had experiences with my investment properties where contractors quit halfway through the job, and now I have to hire new contractors and interview new contractors to finish a job that's halfway done. And nobody likes to finish somebody else's job. And most of the time, there's some details that need to be fixed with that other person's account. It's a lot of things to take into account.
It is. I remember the first time I brought a home buyer that truly did end up purchasing a fixer, and all the contractors that we interviewed weren't willing to go out to the home until we closed escrow. So that's another hurdle that you have to get through, is you have to purchase the home just to start interviewing and getting timelines, and those timelines often get extended. And what
they have other projects too.
Exactly, yeah. And what sounds easy, because I think that those clients said, well, we want to be able to move in as soon as possible, so let's just do the floor, and let's just do, I think they were rewiring some electrical in the kitchen. I think it took 5 months for them just to move in, and they didn't do everything they wanted to do. So that means they were paying rent, they were paying mortgage, and then they had to, wait X amount of time just to get into the home. And it wasn't it wasn't everything that they wanted to do either.
Yeah, and as a first-time home buyer or a retail home buyer, even if you get a price reduction, that doesn't equal money in your pocket. So whatever gets fixed on the property still has to come out of your savings or your reserves.
Mm-hmm.
Because even if the seller lowered that price, maybe $30,000-$40,000, you still have to come up with the money to fix the property, right? Which is going to deplete your reserves, deplete your savings, and it's going to take a lot of your time, especially if you're not someone that is aware of or has experience in dealing with contractors. And if it's the first time you find a property, the chances are, unless you work in that field in construction, or you have a close relative that works in that field that you can trust fully, it's going to be there's going to be a hurdle. It's going to be a difficult process. It's doable, but it's not easy. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, this is why we see a lot of properties that need a lot of repairs either sell directly to investors or to. We've seen a lot of wholesalers now getting the property under contract and then dishing it out to an investor or their investor list. How does that work, Angel? So someone that has a huge fixer-upper that maybe is embarrassed to show it, or it needs so much work that it wouldn't show well, and most retail buyers won't buy it. How do they sell to investors? What have you been seeing on the wholesaling side, which might be a term that the general public is not as familiar with? We're more familiar with it because we're in the industry, but to a general home seller that maybe is in their 70s that hasn't fixed up their property or done upgrades in a while, how's that process look?
So a lot of times, number one, the connection between the investor and the property that has to be sold. And if the investor is a contractor, that's very convenient already, just because if they're able to see the home, they can go out, assess the home for themselves, what kind of work they're going to need to put into it and that.
How does the wholesaling thing work, though? How does that whole, from beginning to end, like for someone that's not aware of how it works, what is wholesaling and how do they get connected with sellers?
Right. So wholesaling will only work for properties that are going to be discounted, because you're working primarily, I would say 9 times out of 10, exclusively with an end buyer who is generally the investor or the contractor. So that's why the properties that wholesalers end up working the most with will be stuff like hoarder homes, will be stuff like pre-foreclosure or some type of extenuating circumstances that's requiring a sale to happen either quickly or efficiently because of whatever the multitude of reasons might be. Once the wholesaler finds that property, they do have a buyer's list, an investor's list that they worked with in the past. And from there, what they'll do is they present it to them. They present the property, the area. You want to have some comps ready to go to show the investors, like, I know what your buy box is. This property that I have here matches what you're looking for in your buy box. Now, once that's done, the way that the investor goes about purchasing it, most of these properties won't go for any traditional financing. So cash, hard money, construction loans maybe, but primarily hard money and cash are the primary ways that they'll be purchased. And most of the time, to help out the homeowner, it'll be covering escrow costs, covering closing costs again, any county transfer fees or anything like that. The wholesaler themselves, it's not a standard commission that you would make from it. There's generally it's worked into the price how much the wholesaler is going to make. So once the wholesaler presents it to the investor, let's just say the property is worth $700K, but they're going to present it to the investor for $550, but they're purchasing it usually for $500 or $525. And from there, that little difference is where the wholesaler is going to make their money. It's called an assignment fee. You can do it a different way. Some wholesaling companies, what they'll do, they'll actually purchase the property themselves. And then once they do a concurrent transaction though, as they're purchasing the property, the end buyer is also, getting their finances in order. It's a concurrent escrow. And some counties, you can do the funding and the recording on the same day. Some counties like LA County, you can't do that. It'll go from one day to the next. But
basically, the wholesaler reaches out, somehow gets in contact with the seller.
Correct.
Like, I'll buy your home for $500K. And
Exactly.
they get into contract with them. And then they find the investor, I'll sell it to you for $600K.
Exactly.
If it makes sense for that investor, then the wholesaler splits the difference. Is that right?
Primarily, yeah.
So I guess the benefit of working with a wholesaler is that they have ideally a big list of cash buyers or investors that can buy this property as is.
Correct.
Because most banks won't lend on it because of the condition of the home. Is that right?
On the wholesaling side, yeah, it can benefit that they have this huge investor list, but it can also benefit the investors that they have this person who's out here, hitting the pavement, finding these deals for them, because that's all they're looking for. They're only looking for these type of properties. That is what you're trained to do. You only want to look at these properties that you can present and are enticing to investors because they'll be able to make money off of it at the end of the day.
Yeah, and if you're a fix and flipper, you have other things that you have going on. On top of trying to find properties to buy, you have current projects going on that you're managing. You're managing employees and construction crews and negotiating maybe the sale of one of your other fix and flips, or the financing on that fix and flip, or maybe they also manage other properties and have to organize that or figure out what to do with some of their projects. So there's a lot of moving parts. And so their benefit of working with a wholesaler is, if they find a good wholesaler they have a relationship with, is I don't have to worry about finding the deals as much because I got this wholesaler that's helping me find these properties that I'm going to buy. And I can focus on the project at hand and fixing this property and making sure that it's going to sell on the MLS or on the retail market for top dollar, so that I can get a good profit, pay my team, pay my construction workers, and find my next project to continue the process, right?
Exactly. Yeah, in my experience, a good wholesaler is always an added positive to somebody like an investor, because you're not doing your job well if you're finding properties that don't make sense to them. If you're presenting to them properties that, the numbers just won't make sense if they do a fix and flip or a buy and hold, whatever they want to do. As a wholesaler, you want to communicate with them very well, get down exactly what they're looking for, how much they're financed for, how much they have available in their assets, and you bring that to them. And then from there, once the escrow is generally pretty smooth because it's a cash purchase. It's a cash purchase. There's no contingencies, anything like that.
Yeah.
And then, as a wholesaler, you want to develop relationships with multiple investors so that you have, any opportunity that comes up, you have people to present it to.
Yeah. And most wholesalers or wholesaling companies will offer to cover all the closing costs and all that stuff along with the sale.
Yes.
But it's not like it's coming out of the goodness of their heart. It's because you're getting such a discount such a high discount in the property where them covering the closing costs for the seller still makes sense. And on the seller side, it sounds good because it's like, well, I'm not paying any realtor commissions and I'm not paying any closing fees.
Exactly.
So if I'm looking at it, as an investor myself and as a real estate agent, I'm thinking, what benefits the seller more? And so it definitely benefits the seller more to hire a real estate agent versus going with a wholesaler. And I know wholesalers are not going to like this. And there's some scenarios where it might make better sense to go with the wholesaler. But in general, it's going to be, the seller is going to be better off going with a realtor. Why? Here's my reasoning for that. For one, this wholesaler is now negotiating directly with the seller. There's no other buyers on the table. This wholesaler negotiates and buys properties for a living. The seller might not sell properties for it. So who's going to have the upper hand in the negotiation? Who's going to be privy to more information as far as these transactions? It's going to be the wholesaler. This is where it's going to be the wholesaler. This is where the home seller benefits from having someone like a realtor to help guide them along. It's like, how much can you really get for this property? Even if the property's in really bad shape, you know, you can get more if you list it on the MLS. And investors also look on the MLS for properties.
Yes. Yes.
Now, if it's a property that needs a whole lot of work and it's overpriced, it's going to take longer or it will not sell. But if it's priced properly, it's going to sell on the MLS. You know what you're going to pay in terms of your commission fees because it's negotiated up front with the realtor. And wholesalers are all about finding the proper spread in the deal. So they're trying to buy it or get it into contract at the lowest price.
Yeah.
And that home seller, if they're not aware exactly what they can sell their home for, they might get it into contract at a way lower price than they could actually sell it for on the MLS. And what does that mean? They're missing out on that equity, whatever it is, 50, 75K. They're hiring, if you're selling a home for 500K and you agree to a 6% commission, right? You're going to be keeping a lot more of your equity if you go that route with a realtor and have them help you, guide you along in the process. Then if you get into contract with a wholesaler and they end up getting a 75K or $100,000 split, where the seller might not even be aware of it because they don't know what they don't know. It's not their fault. It's just that they just don't work in this industry or are not as aware as maybe this wholesaler. Now, this doesn't mean that that I feel that the wholesaler is maybe taking advantage. They're just trying to buy the property at a price where it's going to make sense for them to get it into contract and still be able to have an investor buy it. Because if they get it into contract at too high of a price, the investor's not going to be willing to buy it, right?
Yes.
And so that's where a home seller's got to weigh the options. Like, do I go with this? Do I sell it to this person, or do I hire an agent and have them help counsel me in terms of how much I can realistically sell it for? Also, the realtor is going to put it on the MLS where the general public can now see this property, including investors, including maybe a first-time investor that is looking at the MLS that might be willing to pay a little bit more than the seasoned investor is willing to pay. But just because it's on the MLS doesn't mean an investor is not going to buy it, right? So that's where it's like, okay, if you ask me, hands down, it benefits the seller more to sell it to list it with a realtor and put it on the MLS. They can still sell it to an investor, but at least they'll have more eyes on the property, more investors looking at the deal. And because of that, they're going to be able to sell it for a higher price. Now, when does it benefit a seller to sell it with an investor? Or to sell it with the wholesaler? There is definitely scenarios. Can you guys think of, off the top of your head, when it would benefit to go with the wholesaler or directly with an investor as opposed to listing it?
Man, I mean, the times that I have been in and around one of those sales. Could you guys hear me good? Sorry.
Caught out there for a little bit, but we're good. We can hear you now.
Yeah, when you have, let's say, some sort of family member, relative lives in another state and they happen to pass away, happen to, have something and it's in a trust and you truly don't know the market. You don't want to deal with, having to think much and put much money into it. Sometimes a hassle-free cash offer sounds truly, truly good in that kind of scenario. That's if you want. That doesn't mean you're after the most money. You're just saying, I just need this headache gone. And I think that's where a wholesaler or investor is going to, benefit you if money isn't necessarily the driving force for you.
Yeah, that would be it. If you're on a time crunch, money's not the biggest incentive for you. Maybe you inherited this property. There's no loan on it. It's all profit. and you just absolutely don't want to deal with it, and you happen to come in contact with the wholesaler and an investor that's going to give you enough for you to be satisfied and for you to move on with your life. That's where I can see. That's where I can see where my benefit there. Also, maybe they're in foreclosure and they're going to lose their home in a week or 2 weeks, and they just don't have time to interview agents. They're already going through tough times in their life, and now they have to hire an agent and let people come see the property and go through that whole showing process when maybe your personal life's already in some turmoil, but you happen to come across a cash buyer and this person's willing to buy it and just take it off your hands and you don't have to worry about it. And you also won't lose the home to the bank or get foreclosed upon because you're on this time crunch and you just need to sell it now before you lose it.
Yeah.
Those would be scenarios where it would benefit, right? What else do you see, Angel?
Distressed properties. One thing that I see a lot are properties with fire damage or damaged roofs or huge foundation issues. Properties that just haven't been cared for or neglected. Major fixtures. That'll be primarily where you'll want the investor to come in because they're generally the only ones who are willing to buy those properties. If it's in a good area, if the area makes sense.
Because even investors are not willing to take on all properties if the project is too large. There's some investors that will take light fixtures only. But maybe this wholesaler has a relationship with investors that he knows are willing to take on major fixtures and have the experience to be able to overcome those obstacles on this major fixture. That's where I would feel. That's where I would agree that it would benefit the seller to go, directly with the wholesaler or investor that is willing to take on this major project. Apart from that, if you want to get the most for your home and you have some time to work with, it definitely benefits you more to hire a realtor and go through that process. The realtor doesn't have to put it on the MLS. The home seller can opt out of that. But you have this agent that's now, has your best interest through their fiduciary duty, right, to represent you to the greatest of their ability. And any negotiation that takes place, they have your best interest in mind at all times. And even if it's dealing with an investor, you still have this person helping you navigate these waters where they're experienced as well as this investor's experience, so they can help you make the right decisions. They're not going to make the decisions for you, but they can help, give you the, you could say like, if you take this route, here's what could happen. And if you take this route, here's what could happen. They can kind of lay it out on the table for you. And then you can make the decision yourself, because sometimes, not only with investors, but also with retail buyers, as you get into contract, something comes up on the inspection, and now they want a huge price reduction or something that's unreasonable. And if you don't have someone representing you that is helping you navigate these waters, you might be more willing to drop the price more than needed, per se, than if you did have somebody that's helping you out and representing you and using their experience to help you get the best result from this transaction. So that's ultimately what I see as far as why to sell it directly to an investor or have a wholesaler sell it to an investor through getting the property in contract with you, or choosing to sell the property to a realtor and go about it that way. And obviously, if your property is turnkey, it's really nice, most people will be happy to live in it right away. Hands down, it's going to benefit you to go into the realtor. You're going to pay a commission, but you're going to get top dollar. You're going to get more eyes on your home than without it. And as a realtor myself, it's all about getting eyes, multiple eyes and parties in their property. If it's just one buyer, then it's a real negotiation. You're negotiating with one party. But if it's 2-3 buyers, it becomes more of a competition on the buyer side. Obviously, if it's an unreasonable price, they probably won't buy it anyways. If it's overpriced significantly. But if it's reasonably priced, especially in the environment that we're in right now, where there's a shortage of available listings. You're going to get multiple people interested in your property, and it's going to benefit you to work with a realtor for that reason, as opposed to just negotiating with one person directly.
Yeah. And honestly, what it comes down to when it's all said and done is if you're in Southern California, you hire one of us three to get it done. That's it.
Come full circle, just like on the last episode. Hire us. We'll do a great job for you. Trustworthy, honest, experienced. Obviously, we could talk about ourselves all day, but the reality is, if I'm an investor, and if I'm going to sell any of my properties, I'm going to list it on the MLS, and I'm going to pay a buyer's agent commission because I know that's going to get me the highest dollar amount for my property that I sell.
100%.
If I know cash buyers, I know wholesalers, and I'm sorry guys, but I wouldn't reach out to you unless I list it and I can't sell it. Then I would start looking at different options. But my first option would be to go to the MLS and list it and see what I can get before I start reaching out to wholesalers and have them reach out to their buyers list and put this property.
Yeah. And we've been through it. I mean, when interest rates were, 4% and under, and there wasn't much for sale, there would be no reason to go with an investor. I mean, even if you were on a time crunch, your homes were selling so quick and for so much more money. When money's cheap or when interest rates are low, it just having an agent to put it on the MLS and even just marketing a little bit goes a long way. Having the person in your corner, and not to bag on the for sale by owner, but I saw for sale by owner properties during the low interest rate, low inventory market, and either the home was priced wrong or it wasn't getting enough eyes. It just wasn't getting the same type of activity that a for sale by owner would want, for saving 3%. And it all ultimately came down to most homes were sold by realtors for more money. And that's typically the goal of someone who's selling is, I need this money to cash out, or I need this money to get into the next home, which means I need the most money possible.
100%. 100%. Obviously, all home sellers have different scenarios. So I hopefully this benefits somebody listening to it. It's like, hey, what's my situation? What am I willing? What are my goals throughout the sale of this home? And according to your goals is the route that you're going to take. It's like, hey, I'm in New Jersey and this property's in Chula Vista. I never want to go there. I never want to see it. And I just want to be done as soon as possible. Maybe something to an investor. But maybe you can also hire a really good realtor and have the same results, where this realtor is going to do everything for you and you don't have to worry too much about it. And just hire someone that's experienced, that has the team or has the knowledge base to help you the way that you want to be helped, depending on what your needs are for the specific transaction. So yeah. I think, you guys want to add anything to that? Anything that we missed as far as that can help a home seller?
Nothing on my end, but I did have an interesting question. I don't know if we want to keep this in there or make this a segment, but I was at a networking event, and I was with one group on one end of a room, and what was this networking? This might have been like a cigar networking event. No real estate was involved. But from the other end of the room, I heard someone talk about real estate, and it made me come up with this question. So maybe you guys could answer it.
Okay.
You're familiar with the X-Men, correct?
Yeah.
If you were an X-Man, what power would make it the easiest to be a realtor? I'm going to give you mine. Dude, at that point, I thought I would love to be Nightcrawler, so I could teleport myself to the end of that room and just start talking about the market. Because I heard somebody say it. I'm thinking about buying a home. I just don't know about the market. And I just wanted to poof over there and be like, dude, I got you. But I didn't get to because I was talking to someone.
Yeah.
That would be a good one.
Which X-Men superpower would help you be a better realtor?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Angel?
To be a better realtor in all aspects, I think Professor X would have to be the one. The telepathy, to know what the listing agent or the buyer's agent is thinking, to know what the seller's thinking, to know what your own buyer or your own client is thinking, or the escrow company. I feel like that would give you a huge, huge, huge advantage.
Dang.
Especially when it comes to like negotiating, or like if you're negotiating requests for repairs and the listing agent knows, how much credit the seller is willing to give.
That would be useful information.
It's very useful.
100%. I don't know if I'm drawing a blank here on X-Men superpowers. I think you guys definitely both picked a good one. Is there an X-Men that has a invisibility superpower?
That's a great question.
Sure there is.
There has to be.
Yes. Emma Frost.
I would be that one. For the same reason as Professor X, I would be invisible and listening to conversations that are going to give me useful information to help with the negotiation process, mainly because that's the most difficult part of negotiation is what is the other party thinking? And like Angel said, how low or what are they willing to give, and what are they not willing to give? What's their hard stop, and what's their their limit in all aspects? Because that's something that as realtors we encounter often. It's like negotiating repairs, both for the seller and the buyer, negotiating price. Even just helping the seller pick between different offers. Like, is there something that I should know about this offer that I don't, that is not present in this paperwork, as opposed to this one?
You're right. Because the amount of times I've had to call the other agent and be like, hey, are there any offers on the table? Or like, hey, what's the highest offer? Professor X right there would have helped me out.
Yeah.
Like just highest and best.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes they're willing to give information, but you still don't know if it's truthful. You would hope that it is, right? But you really don't know. I guess you have to kind of trust your gut instinct in that moment and think, is this person being honest with me, or does it seem like they kind of hesitated? Or even if they do hesitate, does that mean they're being dishonest? Not necessarily. Maybe they're just thinking about whether they want to give you this information or not. There's so many nuances in communication and in negotiation that the more experience you have in it, the better, which is why it's good to hire an experienced realtor, because they've been through this negotiation process multiple times and are better at seeing these little nuances and are better at talking to someone that's being honest and have experience with other people that maybe are not as honest. And you kind of start seeing the tall tale signs one way or the other. My strategy usually is just to ask a lot of questions. Ask a lot of questions, very direct questions. And I use this strategy that I learned a while back. It's called peeling the onion. I ask a question, but then I ask a second and a third and a fourth question that are also part of my original question. Instead of just asking that first question, like, is the seller willing to give any credit for repairs? No. Okay. Is this, then you can either take that and be like, okay, well, that's the answer, or you can be like, okay, well, is the seller aware that this is wrong with the property. Okay. If the seller is not willing to give a credit, are they willing to lower the price? Is the seller on a timeline? Is, all these accompanying questions to the original question that's going to help you find out the real truth behind it. Because on the other end, it's very taxing to continue. If you're being dishonest and someone's asking you continuous questions, it's very taxing to continue that dishonesty throughout several questions, and there's going to be a gap where they miss something. And so me as the person asking the question, if I know they're being dishonest, I might not necessarily call them out on it, because I've done that in the past and it doesn't necessarily work out in my favor, but it'll show me more of the situation, without necessarily having to call them out one way or the other. I'll just have a better understanding of the whole scenario together. So through certain questionings, the right questions, the right tonality, building the right amount of rapport prior to asking the questions. The relationship is key, even between realtors. It's huge. You will get more information if you are in good terms with somebody than if you're at odds with them. And we're all humans, sometimes our emotions can lead us astray, but those are all learning lessons for realtors like us. So if maybe we make a mistake one time, now we have that in our pocket, like, okay, I did this, that didn't work, so I got to readjust my strategy and go about it a different way. And that's where the seller or buyer can benefit by working with someone like me, because I've already made mistakes and learned from those, and I'm getting better at my craft, which is helping buyers and sellers. And that buyer or seller can now benefit from my experience and my mistakes without having to necessarily make those mistakes themselves. So, and that's life, ladies and gentlemen. You're welcome.
Wait, Lorenzo, so were they talking about X-Men and real estate, or how did you make that connection? Or
My brain is weird. I was just at one end talking to someone, but my ears perked up as soon as I heard I'm interested in buying a house.
You're like, huh? What? Huh?
Yeah, no, so I was like, damn, if only right now I could just boop,
I see.
So did you talk to them?
No, because
They weren't part of your networking event, right?
They were, but they were on another end. So I was talking to this group, and then by the time I ended up, I didn't even know who said it, to be honest. I was just like, I just need to get to the other end of the room.
Heard it from that direction.
Yeah, I heard it over there. If I could have teleported over there, I would have been like, oh, I'm in this conversation now.
That's like me and tacos. I'm like, carne asada? Huh?
Yeah.
All right, fellas. I think that's some pretty good information for home sellers. So obviously, anybody listening, like and subscribe. If you have questions, post a comment, send us a DM. Find us on Instagram. Find us on Facebook. Find us on LinkedIn. I'm pretty sure we're all over the internet. Do you want to you guys want to share your what's the best way to get a hold of you, Lorenzo?
Yeah, hit me up at Lorenzo L Realtor. You could do it on X, formerly known as Twitter. You could do it on Google or on Instagram. Happy to help.
Angel?
The Angel_agent. That would be probably the best way to get a hold of me, or just Google me and Google real estate, and I'm sure I'll pop up.
Same with me. I'm pretty sure if you Google my name, Jerardo Linares, I'm going to be all over the internet. But if you want to find me on social media, definitely Instagram would probably be the best one. SoCal Broker. I'll pop up, send me a DM. Happy to chat with anybody. And even if you don't want to buy or sell and just have questions, I'm pretty sure all three of us will be more than happy to help with any questions. So, all right, fellas, good chatting with you. See y'all next week.
Later, y'all.
Later.